Welcome to Pan Am Football with Max Dean. For our first ever viewer requested video, thanks Tom, we will be taking a look at the Kansas City Chiefs salary cap, and specifically, the popular statement that the Chiefs had little over $100 in available cap space, yet signed Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, and Travis Kelce to big contracts somehow. If anything in this video confuses you, check out my video on how the NFL salary cap works, which is linked in the description below. You'll also find a link to our weekly podcast, The Pan Am Football Show. And if you can, a like would be very helpful. So here we are, at Kansas City. How the heck did they pull this off? Well, there are a number of factors that allow it. And let me start by saying, if you want remarkably intricate descriptions of contract strategy, check out Joel Corey at Inside the Cap or Jason Fitzgerald at Over the Cap, both of whom do a great job. However, if you are less familiar with the salary cap, this is just the place for you because I will explain things in a much simpler way. I'll also let you know that all salary cap figures are from overthecap.com. First of all, the salary cap has to fit 53 players plus 12 practice squad players per year. While that is true for every team, the way that teams disperse the money varies. Some teams have a bunch of highly compensated players, very few players who fall in the middle, and then a roster full of cheaper players. Other teams have only a few well-compensated players, a bunch of players who fall in the middle, and then fewer cheap players. At a surface level, you can see where the Chiefs lie, in that in 2020, they have 9 players with a cap hit over $10 million, but only 7 players with a cap hit of $2 million to $10 million. Comparatively, the Ravens have only 5 players with a cap hit of over $10 million, but also 18 players with cap hits from $2 to $10 million. For another example, the Browns also have 5 players with cap hits over $10 million, and have 20 players who have cap hits from $2 million to $10 million. Neither strategy is necessarily good versus bad, but you can see the Chiefs have structured their cap in a top-heavy layout compared to other teams, and that speaks to their strategy to some degree. It should be noted that they are not the only team with this strategy. Another important aspect of this conversation is going to be the difference between signing a player to a new contract versus an extension. If you sign player X, a free agent, to a 5-year, $20 million contract, it will be reported as just that, a 5-year deal worth $4 million per year. However, when you sign a player to a contract while he still has years remaining on his previous contract, that is called an extension, and only the new money is generally reported by the media. For an example, let's look at player M, who has 1 year remaining in which he was set to have a $1 million cap hit. He signs a 5-year extension worth $20 million. Well, that means 5 new years added to the 1 year that was there before, and $20 million new dollars added to the $1 million that was there before. In other words, over the next 6 years, that player will earn $21 million. Let's compare X and M side by side. The final aspect of note is the concept of front-loading or back-loading contracts. You can build a contract such that it has different cap hits in different years. Let's look at players X, Y, and Z, who all sign different contracts for 5 years, $20 million, but each contract is built differently. Player X is nicely distributed as we saw before. Player Y has low cap hits early and high cap hits late. And of course, player Z is the opposite. If you look at the average, they all make $4 million per year. But in any given year, their actual cap number may not be $4 million. Now let's single out player Y. Of course, this is a bit oversimplified, but what if the team cut player Y after year 3? Suddenly, he only made $6 million over 3 years. Player Y only made $2 million per year, even though his contract was reported as $4 million per year. This is just a simple example of how a contract can be made to sound bigger than it will ever be in real life. Now that we've gone over the basics, let's look at the Chiefs. I'm just going to look at the most expensive players since that's really what this is all about. Here is a chart of the Chiefs' prized players and their cap hits over the next 12 years before the new contracts for Jones, Mahomes, and Kelce. Keep in mind that these numbers are all in the millions, so I've rounded them to the nearest $10,000. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce both had 2 years left on their contracts, and Chris Jones had the franchise tag placed on him. The total cap hit for all of the top players is at the bottom. Take a close look at the 2020 cap hits for Mahomes, Kelce, and Jones. Now here is the same chart, but after the 3 new contracts were signed. Currently, cap numbers on Travis Kelce are not available, but we do know his cash flow. Without knowing the type of payments he is receiving, we cannot calculate his cap hits. However, because we know the cash flow, we can know what his maximum cap hit in 2020 could be. It could be less, but not more. We also know the minimum cap hit for 2025. Let's compare these new 2020 cap hits to the old ones. Notice anything? How can they be so close? Well, remember what I said about extensions. Since Kelce and Mahomes both had 2 years left, the money and years reported are in addition to 2020 and 2021. While players may see an immediately boosted cap hit as a result of the extension, it is not necessary. So in effect, most of the money that news outlets have been reporting about the Chiefs has very little to do with 2020 and even 2021, but rather 2022 and beyond. This also circles back to the backloading I brought up earlier. The Chiefs backloaded both Mahomes and Kelce, but for different reasons. Mahomes, because he is young, and since they have him under contract for 12 more years, by the time his cap hits go up a lot, the salary cap will also have gone up a lot. Kelce is because he is a lot older, and they likely only plan to keep him on the roster for 4 out of his remaining 6 years. This will function much like the player Y example from earlier, where this contract looks big when he signs it, but once all is said and done, much of that money will not actually be in his pocket. Chris Jones is only slightly different. He was tendered with a franchise tag, which stood as a 2020 salary cap placeholder until this 4-year contract was signed. So in as simple terms as possible, the Chiefs were able to sign these players by paying them more in the future than right now in 2021. Since these players will cost more in later years, let's take a quick look at some of the Chiefs' most expensive players who will have to depart to make the numbers work after 2020. First is Sammy Watkins. His deal ends after 2020 anyway, so he'll be a free agent. Tyrann Mathieu and Anthony Hitchens are both likely candidates to be released after the 2020 season. Releasing both players would create over $20 million in cap space for 2021. After that, Eric Fisher or Mitchell Schwartz could sign an extension that could create some flexibility for the Chiefs. Those players would not be likely to be released. So how did the Chiefs sign all of these players with so little cap room? The simplest possible answer is that they are subscribing to a top-heavy salary cap strategy, as well as backloading their player contracts to cost more in the future than right now. And FYI, they are knocking it out of the park if you want my opinion. Thank you so much for watching. If you have requests on other players or teams, please let me know, because I am here for you. You can find Pan Am Football on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as me, Max Steen. To get all of our Pan Am Football content right in your feed, just hit subscribe.